Welcome back to 2.5 Hours. I'm Brian Becker. We're joined in our Washington, D.C. studio here on K Street with three guests to talk about the 2012 election. We're joined by Neil McCabe. He's the editor of Human Events.
Good to see you, Brian.
Tony Welsh, he's the with the Dewey Square Group, and Janet Murphy, a candidate for the Green Party here in Virginia. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, of course, the 2012 election is in November 2012, but the election campaign has begun in earnest months ago and is certainly dominating the media and the news here. The Obama administration, Neil McCabe, is plagued by tens of millions of people being unemployed, a large number of people foreclosed who were in their homes when he took office. By any sort of normal measure, an incumbent under these economic circumstances would certainly be considered extremely vulnerable. And yet the general perception is that the Republican field isn't able to get it together, isn't able to really connect, is weak enough that President Obama, in spite of the difficult economic circumstances, still could prevail. How do you see it?
Well, I think, Brian, the primary caucus process has just started. I think we had our first caucus and primary, less than 2 months ago, and there's still a very active decision process going on within the Republican Party. And so you're taking the known quality of President Obama versus, an unknown quality. It could be Newt, it could be Santorum, it could be Romney. And so that, as that's being decided, you're sort of, Obama's being judged against a cloud. And when we get resolution on the Republican side, I think you'll see things convalesce.
Tony, same question to you. Sure. Is President Obama vulnerable given the economic situation? Do you view that the Republican field is, as it's widely perceived to be, so weak that, in fact, President Obama has an unusually strong position in spite of the difficulty in the economy?
I'll make one note to what Neil said. Obama actually does worse against the cloud, against an unknown Republican candidate. Obama performs not too well. When he goes up, when he's paired against Newt Gingrich or Romney or even Santorum, Santorum's a little less and not so strong. He does a lot better. His point, and I think this is what's at the core, and why he has improved lately in the polls and why his prospects look a little bit better, is because he has told the narrative. He said, when I started, we were in the middle of a recession. True. And here was the job loss in the first months of my campaign, and now we're looking at, or his presidency, and now you're looking at about 22, 23 months of consecutive job growth. That shows the country, while not perfect on economic issues or employment, for instance, that it is moving in the right direction. I think he gets a benefit from that.
Janet, you're the Green Party, a third party.
Yes.
Traditionally in the United States, third parties have done poorly or have been made negligible largely because of the absence of resources or access to the mass media. The election as it's shaping up, it's widely perceived also, especially by independent candidates, certainly those who advocate third parties, that this is a contest between two moneyed parties. In other words, money is dominating both the Republicans and Democrats, regardless of the personality of the candidates.
Neil, Brian, it's not just money, it's access to the information channels. And the new thing is social media. And this has changed the game entirely. And I think that we will see a lot of people all of a sudden waking up, like Rip Van Winkle saying, I can do this. I can get out there and gather petition signatures. I can get on the ballot. And that's what we advocate for, more candidates in the Green Party. We're a big tent. We include, Independent Green includes libertarian, conservative, progressive, and everybody who cares about the environment. And we're for solar energy and infrastructure. And one candidate that seems to be ignored so often is Ron Paul, who advocates for so many of the green issues and the conservative issues of bringing home our resources and dialing down the wars that have been pursued.
Well, granted, social media and the internet has, in some ways, made politics and all things in life more accessible to average people, but still, isn't it money dominating the system? I mean, look at what happened with Newt Gingrich's sudden rise. I mean, he was seemingly gone a couple times, but recently it's because
he was carpet bombed.
Well, he was he was carpet bombed, meaning, well, why don't you explain what you mean by carpet bombed?
Well, a Romney-associated super PAC came in and just blasted the Gingrich with all of these negative ads. I think I saw something where like 1 in 4 ads being run in Iowa were like anti-Gingrich, and if you money is speech, and if you have the money, you can sort of get your message out there. It's always a big problem when you talk about money with conservatives, because the mass media tends to be more biased towards the Democrats and the liberals, and so if Republicans or conservative candidates can't get their message, the only way they can get their message out is from ads.
I can't believe you're saying that the
Believe it, I just said
media
it.
are dominated by the liberals.
All right, well, let's just
because-
talk about the Washington
Yeah.
Post, the New York Times, CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN.
But how
Maybe
is it
just
every
them.
morning? How is it every morning I hear a meme dropped in on NPR radio to say we're inching toward a war with Iran? Oh, if Madonna didn't have her concert on May 23rd this year, we'd certainly be hearing from Israel about that bomb we have lined up for Iran. Every time you turn on even the supposed NPR radio, they've got that thing. And Monsanto is a supporter
You're making a
of
classic
NPR
mistake
radio.
in arguing with the conservative side, which is to cite facts and to look for facts.
Well, hold on. NPR is the voice of the conservatives. It's insane.
He was able to to give you a list, but not evidence of it, and that's more important because the talking point fits. It simply isn't that. But his point about Newt Gingrich being outmanned in Florida, outspent in Florida, the problem with it is that money that blasted Newt Gingrich out of the water wasn't at all related to the Republican base. It accomplished what Mitt Romney is really, really good at, and that is destroying an opponent. Talking about negative attacks, they went at Newt as hard as you could possibly go. And with millions of dollars, because it was super PAC, it was with the wealthiest of donors.
Well,
Romney's friends.
let's just explore the super PAC phenomenon. I mean, they've been around, but now with the Supreme Court decision on the Citizens United decision, there's an ability for super PACs, political action committees, to use disguised, hidden, invisible money in large quantities, sometimes coming from 1 or 2 donors who can have an inordinate influence. So you're talking about Gingrich being destroyed by Romney, but in South Carolina he had
His own
Adelson
super
giving
PAC.
$5 million
Sure.
to come in and do anti-Romney ads, and that had the same predictable outcome that Gingrich won in South Carolina.
I mean, I don't have a problem with money in politics. It's, if you can buy an ad, you can buy an ad. If you can raise money, you can raise money. I mean, President Obama is going to raise, $1 billion, and he will spend that money. I mean, he certainly ran.
And the Republicans will spend $1 billion too.
Sure, and the ads that Obama ran against Hillary Clinton, the messaging that was going out about Hillary Clinton was horrible. I mean, it's just terrible things that they were saying about Hillary Clinton, and then she becomes his Secretary of State.
Go ahead, Tony, jump in.
Well, horrible I don't hear evidence of like what?
Well, for instance, that she lied. They put out a story that she lied about coming under fire.
You said
in
about
Bosnia.
her. Now you said they put out a story in ads. Let me talk.
Okay,
I'll
go ahead.
All right. So with Obama, I think it's an important note about money. He will embrace super PACs. I don't think he has a choice. If they're going to raise $500 million through super PACs and put that all in attack ads.
But he said before that he didn't like that system. He wasn't for it. Now, as soon as... Isn't this another case where President Obama says one thing and then as soon as the quote reality comes in, he changes?
I won't go with another case. I'll go with this case. This is a case where he said, I'm clearly against super PACs, and he said that repeatedly. But the other option was, I will sit here with my campaign and let super PACs attack me without using that vehicle. He says, I'm against them, but this is the playing field we're on, and this is the one I have to play on. I think he can be criticized for that. I think the far dumber approach to that would be running a campaign and allowing $500 million or more to be directed at tearing you down without fighting back in the same playing field.
Okay, we're taught since we're young school kids, and even before, that this is a country of, by, and for the people. Now, not all the people have the ability to give $5 million or $10 million or $50 million to a super PAC so that some candidate can destroy another candidate. I mean, isn't the democracy transformed into a plutocracy of, by, and for the wealthy when money is this kind of dominating influence on the election?
Absolutely. The Citizens United decision institutionalized that, and to tip that back over is our purpose. We would like to really take that back down. I don't want to be naive about this, but I really do believe that the media is talking and the ads are being purchased, but you really can't buy an actual vote. You actually have to influence somebody enough to get them to go out and vote. But the reality, as we know it, is that media is influential, other people are influential, and the way the game is going is influential. And the other thing is that when, like, for instance, the Humane Society has now partnered with part of the federal government to lobby and turn about factory farms, to be nicer to the chickens. But for one farmer to be nice to chickens is suicide, because if they have to spend a little extra to take care of the environment and take care of their stewardship of the resource, the other guy down the street is not under any such constraint, and they'll take the market. So they'll lose out. So the individual does need the government to step in and balance the playing field. So to your question about
there's no one to
we
stand
the
up
people,
for the chickens.
we want to be kind to the animals.
Sure.
This is stewardship. This is fair.
Before we eat
now,
them.
by the way, as I believe that I read that you were a reporter and that you were in.
Yes.
Okay. So how can you say that to the issue of the Catholic Church, on their issues about?
I was a reporter for Boston's Catholic paper.
Yeah, so you probably know a lot about it. Why are they speaking out now about this settled law about the birth control for women, and when they never spoke up about the taxpayer dollars going to wage all the unjust wars all over the world?
Well, I think the church has been
ever-
very vocal against what it called unjust wars. I think Pope John Paul II was against the liberation of the Iraqi people. I think Pope Benedict has spoken. There's no shortage of Catholics and Catholic leaders talking against going unjust wars.
Right,
but I don't know what are you talking about the contraception decision?
But I want to come back to some of the social issues in a little bit.
Okay.
I know this is a hot subject right now about health care and the issue of contraception and the intervention of the Catholic Church, and of course it's playing out in the Republican primary, especially with thematically Rick Santorum is just pounding away
Right.
that President Obama, by suggesting or insisting that women have equal access to contraception, that's an attack or a war against religion. But I want to stay on the issue of money. If we
Absolutely.
could. And again, I want to ask the two of you what I asked Janet about the question of the plutocracy versus the democracy. In other words, are we sort of just pretending that this is a democracy when speech is money, money is speech, and then there's inordinate concentrations of money? We have a Occupy Wall Street movement that's saying that, it is of, by, and for the 1%. In other words, for the rich.
Well, I mean, eventually somebody has to get votes. And there's a lot of times a candidate who's going to win, by nature of him just sort of having that kind of momentum, more people will donate to him just because of that kind of momentum. But it isn't always true that the better financed candidate wins. And, I just don't understand why we have to get involved, why the government's even involved in finance and things like that. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, President Kennedy said that once he got a telegram from his father. He says, "Jack, I don't want you to buy any more votes than what you need. I'll be damned if I'll pay for a landslide." And so, I mean, it's like you have this great Democratic liberal hero, Jack Kennedy, and his father was what we call a billionaire today, who financed all of his campaigns. I mean, so I wonder what money really matters, unless it's a conservative Republican you need to trash.
I think you can make 2 points. I think the valid point is that money doesn't ensure your success. Otherwise, we'd have Governor Meg Whitman, right, the incredibly wealthy Californian who ran. But it also isn't not important, right? It's very central to campaigns. And so the super PACs, there has been an interest in limiting, because you can't push all the money out of campaigns, but there has been an interest in limiting the effect of money on political campaigns. And that's what Citizens United undoes. It says you can give incredible amounts. You can give as much as you'd like, billions of dollars to a super PAC if you have the money. That's clearly the type of thing that has concerns. Maybe not in this presidential election, but down the road you could easily see where that could become problematic, where you get to the point where a poll of candidates wouldn't matter nearly as much as checking who has the larger bank account. Mitt Romney was wealthy enough to where that came into play in Massachusetts, where his wealth and funding his campaigns helped him out. One of the things about President Obama, who raised a lot of money using online, was that the average donation turned out to be about $70, with hundreds of thousands of people donating to the campaign. That isn't necessarily going to work for everyone, but maybe there's a balance that says you won't have unlimited donations, because that will mean that lobbyists and the wealthier do have a stronger voice in campaigns than other folks.
Obama had a message, he had a narrative, he had momentum, he had enthusiasm, and
right, he didn't just have a website that worked magically.
Right, and so
fair enough.
And Obama, one could argue, having been on the other side of that tsunami, he maybe didn't even need a lot of that money.
Sure.
Just because he had the message.
Right.
But my question is, regardless of the fact that we can all agree that just because you have the most money or spend the most money doesn't guarantee that you will be the winner, we also know that if you don't have money, you can't compete.
Sure.
And that has the effect of sort of reducing political participation to a very, very narrow segment of the American population.
I know I just spoke, but I want to throw something out that I think everybody here will agree on as well. Jon Huntsman, who didn't fare all that well, but who did get a lot of media attention from the so-called liberal media. He got a lot of media attention. They liked that candidate a lot. He would not have been in this race if his father weren't a multimillionaire and couldn't donate to that super
billionaire. His father invented the phone box for Big Macs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's one example. So I'm agreeing with the essential point that in many cases, without money, you cannot be a candidate for higher office.
But I mean, honestly, Brian, where isn't that true?
Okay.
Where in the world isn't that true?
Well, let's talk about that. Each of you can discuss it. But I have the impression that money and the nature of the way elections are organized in Europe, in Latin America, in Asia, to the extent that there are elections, are far less dominated by corporate and banking money. And
well, you're going to find wealthy people are going to be the ones running for office.
Yes, but look at the U.S. Congress. How many members of the U.S. Congress are not well-to-do or supported by the well-to-do? I mean, how many poor people are in the U.S. Congress, for instance? Working people.
I
would guess none.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, why, if it's of, by, and for the people, is it impossible for an average person to? I mean, it's not that intelligence is based on how much income you have,
Sure.
or capacity, or commitment, or dedication, or energy.
I think your point is not so much why isn't a poor person in Congress. It gets more to what advocacy would the poor under this system have in Congress, and you would see that waning, because for all their ability to turn out votes and to help campaigns by casting actual votes, when money is the fuel of campaigns, and the poor just aren't a part, in large part, of fueling campaigns. And when it comes time to, when there's a large debate in Congress about issue X, well, the people who have lobbyists, and who fuel those campaigns, those are corporations and people who are wealthier.
We're going to go ahead.
No, I was going to say that there was a time where if you had a problem with your government, you wanted to petition your government, you would go to City Hall or you'd even go to your State House. Now, because so many of these decisions are made in Washington and it's so confusing and the regulations so crazy, it's only people with resources who can hire lobbyists to actually live in Washington, D.C., who can sort of make your petition on your behalf.
That's true.
And so what happens is if you want to get rid of lobbyists in Washington, a very good way to do that is to take away the power of Washington and devolve it back to the people in the states.
Well, the Western states, many of them, you can see a map, all the Western states and Hawaii or Alaska have initiative and referendum in their procedures. But Eastern states, except for Maine and Massachusetts, you can't initiate a citizen referendum. You have to go through to the committee. You have to influence that politician. And the politician is survivalist, and they want to survive, so they're listening to who has issues that they're paying money for, like, say, a big company like Monsanto or the big chemical companies. They dish out money to both of the big oil and auto parties, and the oil and auto party guys just go and, okay, boss, I'll do what you said because you're paying me.
Well, let's
take the
explore
money.
that, the idea that the the corporations, the banks, see both parties basically as an investment or a hedge against whatever's coming. Certainly, we see lots of discussion about social issues, foreign policy issues, where there's real debate, vitriolic debate, strident discussion. And yet, when it comes to certain elements of the way government works, there seems to be almost unanimity.
Right.
For instance, when the banks were in trouble, even though there was a lot of debate, instantly, almost within days, Congress voted to pass the Troubled Asset Relief Program.
The TARP, yeah.
The huge bailout, $600+ billion in immediate cash infusions to the banks, no strings attached, and then loan guarantees of trillions more. And then the Republicans lost. President Obama came in, not a Republican, not a conservative, and yet the same bailout process continues sort of unabated. So you have people on the left and the right who are critical of that, but within the halls of Congress, it seems like secured, fastened down custody by these banks and corporations.
Well, you're also going to see, with this highway bill that's going to go through the House and Senate, you're going to see Republicans and Democrats will all sort of come together, sing Kumbaya, and they will vote for this massive highway bill.
When in fact they should be building rail, because if you read this wonderful book by Winslow Wheeler, Wastrels of Defense, you know that the money that we've spent with unanimity across party lines, bipartisan, we've waged war, and all that money has gone down the drain. And when we should have been building our infrastructure here with water and sewer, municipal...
Or companies could build railroads if it made sense.
Yes.
Rather than have a government-built railroad.
Well, I think her point was money squandered could have been better invested here at home.
Right,
Yes.
But private people make those decisions better than bureaucrats.
But
the more of our economy we have, what you're talking about too with the deciding about who bails out what. I mean, that's the government getting involved in the economy. And now that the hysteria has calmed down, we look back 3 years later and we say, that might have been a mistake. There might have been a process to go through to force these people to answer for what they did.
Indeed. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I think that the point that I'm also making is that while out of office, there's a lot of demagogy ranting against the government for bailing out banks and corporations, and then in government, the new party, the party that's taken the place of the incumbent, does
that's what they told. So when the
Republicans
Republicans took over the House and there was a huge increase of Tea Party people both in the House and the Senate. Immediately, the message came from the media is that these Tea Parties, they have to grow up. They had their campaigns, but now they have to get to the act of governing. Now you're the government who has the party that has to govern. And by govern means you have to go along to get along, and you can't stand up for these things. And so when senators like Rand Paul stand up against some of this stuff, he's considered a troublemaker. They don't even talk about the issues. They talk about him as a troublemaker.
Rand Paul's a great example. I think it's fine to be a troublemaker. To be a party of troublemakers, there's no responsibility there. Because if the message was, we will get elected upon the premise that a depression would have been better for this country. We'd be stronger if only we'd gone through a depression. Take no action to address the recession. Let the banking system, not only in this country, but in the world, collapse. Take no action whatsoever, which many people were advocating. And now
nobody was advocating a depression, and not everybody's convinced that depression was going to happen. There was a lot of Chicken Little scary talk.
Your point becomes no more valid with volume. I will point this out to you, that there were people advocating that nothing be done. And most economists, maybe not you, but most economists said that would have led to catastrophe for our country. And so because there became the grown-up thing, there is no Tea Party. There are Republicans who needed new marketing, who needed a new brand, who became the Tea Party. But because if the Tea Party weren't universally for Republicans, then I might have another way of looking at that. But the party that built up deficits, who said we can have tax cuts and wars, the height of responsibility to all of a sudden, irresponsibility to all of a sudden in 2008 say, look what happened to our economy at your hand.
Tax cuts and war?
Right. Well, we
you can have tax cuts and war, but you cannot have tax cuts and war and no deficits.
We have debt.
And-
We're in
and
the
no debt.
hole.
And deficits are a problem.
Not according to Dick Cheney, but according to the Tea Party.
Right.
See, what I've done
The
is
Tea Party-
I've taken what the so-called Tea Party message and said, if you are for these things, what were you doing? Did you become awake? Did you become thinking beings in 2008 at the election of President Obama? Yes. For the Tea Party, that is your existence. Because if you existed earlier, then you would have thrown the bum out in Congress. You would have said, we are the Tea Party
a
against
lot
Republicans.
a lot of it was
Yeah.
frustration because the regular Republicans that were being sent to Washington weren't fighting the way they were supposed to. They would campaign conservative,
Like they did
and they
win.
would govern liberal.
Like they did win. Like Republicans did win. Think of the time when
they
Republicans...
cut taxes,
Ronald Reagan also rose tax.
but
also raised taxes.
cut marginal rates significantly.
So-
and under Reagan, the revenues to the federal government doubled, but the spending tripled, and that was the Democrats in Congress who fought him every step of the way because
There's always an excuse.
But he
Ronald
tried
Reagan
to,
is responsible for any of the tax increases
the
he
Reagan
approved.
budget zeroed out Amtrak, zeroed out legal services, zeroed out
Did he
all
raise
these welfare.
taxes 11 times?
He raised taxes on the margins, on the edges, but the marginal tax rates went down.
Our
But
tax
what
is...
what
I'm sorry.
we have now is the 1% is even wealthier. So, Tony, really, I wasn't for having a depression and you know, like the Dust Bowl or whatever the outcome would have been if the banks had been allowed to fail properly, logically, in a fair and square sportsman-like way. But right now, what we've got is the rich are so rich. The stock market's booming. And the students who went to school, and the economy is cratering right before them because they come out of school with $100,000 of student loan debt. I don't know what the average is, but the guy sitting here in this chair yesterday had $100,000 of student debt. You can't even take a Chapter 7 on that.
Right.
Chapter
And-
7 meaning you can't declare bankruptcy. It's the one place you can't declare
Right.
That
bankruptcy
sort of
in America.
process
Right.
that would be
How cynical
get you
of
through
us
something.
to take these 18-year-olds and say, oh, you got to come into, welcome to the United States of America, young people. Here's our economy. Here's your loan. And of course there'll be a job. That would be so cynical. You couldn't even get away with that in the housing market. The appraiser would go out and say,
No,
is
it's
that
horrible
house
with those-
worth $100,000 to that
No,
I'm
those
making a
college
loan
kids
on?
got
Was
scammed.
We're going
there a
to
job
we're
for
going to
that
continue
kid?
the debate, but we have to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Welcome back to our second segment of 2.5 hours. We're in Washington, D.C. We're discussing the 2012 election. We're with Neil McCabe. He's the editor of Human Events. Tony Welsh, he's the Dewey Square Group. And Janet Murphy, a candidate for the Green Party in the state of Virginia. Let's pick up where we left off. The issue that I was presenting was that once in office, both parties seem to do the bidding of the major lobbyists, the major corporations, the major banks. It's about money and it's about power, and yet that can't be the issue that they go to the electorate with. So what's the Republican Party going to use as its principal theme in going after President Obama? What are the Democratic Party issues going to be in response? How will that play out?
Well, we were talking about the cloud before. I mean, I don't think the Republican Party has decided yet how it's going to go against
The cloud meaning President Obama is running against no one.
Yeah,
at the
it's
moment.
like no one and almost like no idea. I mean, there's a lot of people who think that it should be just based on economics and that basically the handling of the economy and sort of the stiltedness and sort of this healthcare law that's like a piano on the back of private enterprise. But there are other people, sort of, I'm in their camp. I would like to see more of a social conservative component to the Republican message. And I think that there's a lot of members of the Democratic coalition who will listen to a social conservative message more than they would listen to the economic.
Well, clearly Mitt Romney, who at certain times in his political career has been a centrist Republican, he authored the Massachusetts health care plan, which is...
He's like Zellick.
Yeah, it's the same as President Obama's health care plan that the conservatives have derided. He's got a lot of money. He's got a lot of support from the Republican sort of establishment. But the conservatives, even now, are repudiating him. How will that impact his chances in November?
Well, he won't. If they repudiate him, he won't make it. I think his candidacy is in a lot of trouble right now, and it's in so much trouble. We were talking about the last segment. We were talking about the Tea Party. There was a time when Mitt Romney wouldn't say the word Tea Party because he was looking for the general election, and he knows that it's sort of among certain people that's sort of a dirty word. Now he's saying, no one's more Tea Party than I. And so when when Mitt Romney embraces the Tea Party, that tells you that he senses he's in trouble and he needs to change his message.
But the Tea Party, while dominating perhaps, or that conservative agenda dominating in the Republican primaries, really represents a relatively negligible part of the population, not probably more than 20%. How do you win a general election
that
with that
negligible
agenda?
part of the population just delivered the House of Representatives and a bunch of new senators. I mean, it's always weird when you say something's out of the mainstream, but they win an election, because that's how you win an election when you're in the mainstream.
I'll add something to that, where I don't think it's a negligible part of the electorate. But I do think it's but it's less overall than it is within the Republican Party. So the Tea Party, you give them credit for winning that. I give the economy credit for Republicans.
Meaning the bad economy.
The bad economy for the Republicans. I give that credit for the Republicans taking office. What's interesting about Mitt Romney, and I used to be, I think, about as confident in the Republican side as I could possibly be, that they will always nominate their strongest candidate, the person who's going to end up who's going to be the best against President Obama. But I think something else is afoot here, is going on here, because several times there's been, think of all the people who've led, from Donald Trump to Herman Cain to Newt Gingrich to Rick Santorum was the last one, Michelle Bachmann barely, right?
Perry?
And please forgive me, and Rick Perry, and Rick Perry, I don't know how I forgot him, and Rick Perry by a huge amount. But what I'm sensing, because everyone has been vanquished before, but Rick Santorum, in one national poll about to come up, may actually overtake Romney, according to the latest I've heard. And so I think it's deeper. And I didn't know, and I don't think any of us could have predicted, was how deep that dislike. What the base of the Republican Party is saying is, we really, really do not like you.
We're just not that into you.
Well, yeah, but
you mean
I didn't.
Not into Mitt Romney.
Not into Mitt Romney.
Well,
but
that's
I
what we
didn't
were
know
talking before. He doesn't have that core that, like, people will disagree if policy's one way or the other, but if they believe that you're true to yourself, they'll be attracted to you. And that flip-flopping chameleon character of Romney rubs people the wrong way. And frankly, a lot of conservative Republicans would rather not win with a fake candidate.
Okay, so what?
Well, meanwhile,
go ahead,
over
Jenna,
at Roseanne Barr came out, and in last summer she even said, "I'm the Green Tea Party candidate, and I want to speak for the 99%, not the 1%. I'm not left, I'm not right." And she's a comedian, but she's for real. And she had her ground
and is
game.
she running for the Green Party?
She is announced for the she's one presidential candidate for the Green Party. Another solid candidate for the Green Party is Dr. Jill Stein from Lexington, Massachusetts, where the Rube Bridge arched the flood. And she said she wants to start the second revolution.
That poor, humble community there.
Yes, they're so poor in Lexington. Lexington is very upscale, very posh. Jill Stein came to Washington for Occupy Congress 2 weeks ago, over at and Carrie Campbell and I met her over there. She is an advocate for the green issues. We want more candidates. We want to define the conversation for all the people, not just the people who
Let's stay with this issue, because you had
parties.
After the 2008 election, President Obama came into office, great enthusiasm, optimism, euphoria, I would say, on the part of the Democrats and many independents. For the conservatives, for the Republicans, it was like the devil himself had taken the White House, and the Tea Party movement started up in earnest and then used health care as its mobilizing tool. Okay, they were dominant in terms of grassroots sort of presence or perception, but now we have the Occupy movement on the left. In other words, a movement that's also against the powers that be, against the big establishment, against the federal government and its connection to the 1% or to Wall Street. And so is it possible that this election will be different in the sense that grassroots activism of either the right or the left could in fact become decisive?
I believe it could very well, Brian, and that's what I'm hoping. And we've got we've got a great campaign, more trains, more candidates, fiscally conservative in the sense of resources and not wasting resources. This morning, I was speaking with a man on the train about water. He works for EPA. The rivers, there are still polluted rivers that haven't been reported. There's infrastructure here, water main sewers that need attention here in the United States. We need to bring our dollars home and work on our own economy. So that's the conservative line of the Green Party.
Okay, so
But
you're
I don't
saying
see Occupy.
Go ahead.
I don't see the Occupy movement doing what the Tea Party movement did, and I think it's just a different character. And maybe I can't put. I'm not as close to it as maybe I should be, but I just don't see that same kind of organizing and the same kind of actual campaigning going on with the Occupy people.
The Tea Party had the explicit, and some of the Tea Parties had the explicit sponsorship and financing and funding of major Republican forces. The Occupy movement is independent of it, but I'm not talking just about the people in the
they have George Soros.
I'm not
Yeah,
just.
but he's not.
I'm not. Well, jump in, Tony, if you want. But I'm not talking about the people just in tents and encampments. But this has become a dominating part of the political narrative since September 2011. The fact that there was the rekindling of a mass sort of social justice movement that was against both the Republicans and Democrats.
But I don't see their next step. Where does Occupy? I mean, Occupy has taken over the conversation. They've certainly had an impact in the national narrative. But I don't see where Occupy is going for their next step.
I think even the Occupy folks would tell you that it hasn't had that same focus of the Tea Party. And a few people will remember that the Tea Party didn't have focus at the beginning. I think it was given shape by a few. I think it was given shape by a few in the media who wanted it to have purpose because it was a great story to tell. I think where we are now, as it relates to the presidential election, is that when it comes to enthusiasm of the electorate, the Republicans right now, and because the candidate is likely to be Mitt Romney or one of the others, Rick Santorum might change a little bit, but the enthusiasm for their frontrunners hasn't been there. The enthusiasm on the other side for President Obama, even in this economy, is a bit higher. That could have an effect in a close election. What I find interesting is, especially when we talk about the Tea Party, is that we talk about that cloud that President Obama's running against. What's interesting on the other side is there are also, and few people have pointed this out, Bill Maher is one of them, that the Republicans are running against a fictional Obama, one that they've made up. Because they'll run against a president who's raised taxes, Obama's cut taxes. They'll run against a president who's anti-Second Amendment or anti-gun. Obama hasn't made one move to restrict gun ownership in this country. He hasn't made one move to restrict gun ownership in this country. In fact, the one bill that he did sign off on allowed for guns to be in federal parks and in federal spaces. They'll run against somebody who's weak on the war on terror. Obama's incredibly strong on that.
You can't just get away with that. There's
nothing to get away with.
I mean, there have been things where there are M1 rifles in South Korea that were approved to be imported to the United States, and Obama canceled that import order. I mean, so that's something he effectively did. There's reporting requirements. The states that border along Mexico, every time you buy more than one long rifle within, say, a 5-day period,
a new policy under President Obama.
Yes.
No.
It is a new policy.
Well, let me I want to go back and pose another question to you. We can come back to these kind of issues, which will undoubtedly be issues again in the debate in 2012. But you mentioned, Neil, that the Occupy movement had influenced the narrative, changed the public discourse. In what way?
Please. I mean, you see, you remember, the surge in Iraq, whether you were for the surge or against the surge, you certainly recognize that the word surge is used all the time now, whether it's a diplomatic surge, you hear business people saying that word surge, and I think you hear Occupy all the time just because it's like this idea of people standing up and sort of saying, hey, we're not going to take it anymore. I think that sort of mood that they're tapped into, there's a lot of frustration.
Well, it just wasn't Occupy. It was 99%.
Yeah, sure.
99% is what took hold. It said they pushed the idea that there's 99% versus incredibly wealthy and growing wealthier at an incredibly fast rate, 1%. And while Republicans' first reaction to that was, that's class warfare. The second reaction, once they realized it has taken root, was Mitt Romney saying, well, no, I am for poor people, and I'm for the middle class, and I'm with the 99%.
Mitt Romney is not necessarily,
He's going to be your standard bearer.
Regardless, but I mean, it is class warfare.
Well, yeah, sure.
I mean, so don't make it sound like it wasn't true.
No. Wait a minute. You're not in a class warfare to demand fairness. That isn't class warfare.
When you pit one class against the other,
come on,
that's class warfare.
Again, slogan is not.
You're just talking to me about 1%, 99%.
But
now we're not going to do slogans.
There's a real issue there. If you can talk about, there's a real underlying issue here, and it is it true or not that the wealth for that 1% has been growing at an astronomical rate?
But it's not the same people, Tony.
It is based.
The people change all the time. Look at the Fortune 400 every year.
If you can point me to somebody in the top of that 1% who then became at the bottom rung, no.
If you look at the wealthiest families in America, it changes all the time.
The argument made by the Republicans is that. The United States is an exceptional country. They call it American exceptionalism, and that unlike Europe, for instance, where the United States derived its inception, which was a clearly rigid caste or class society, that the United States was just open to individual development. There was a meritocracy. There was something
unique. You could have guns. You could have religion.
There was something exceptional about the United States. And isn't it true that the Occupy movement has sort of in a popular way, and for in some ways the first time in popular discourse, re-emphasized the fact that it is a class society, even though it's not precise classes, it's the 1% and 99%. In other words, that's a distinguishing feature of American society.
And everybody might have a different view, but for me, what the Occupy movement is, the government built up this. We had a housing bubble you were talking about. Yeah. We built up a college bubble where we started loaning people and granting people all this money to go to college, and then you had all of these new colleges start up and expanding, and all these people graduated with a degree that wasn't worth it. And the reason why it wasn't worth it is because there was an explosion of college graduates, and all these people got stuck.
But because of the cynicism of the companies that have sent the jobs elsewhere.
Burst. The college bubble burst, right. And these guys are the chumps who are holding the bag.
I just have to ask you,
and now they're expressing
when
that
when you look at the indexes throughout, especially the industrial world, but the industrial world now includes places like South Korea, increasingly China, India. The number of U.S. college graduates in the population, and particularly in scientific, mathematics, and other very important sectors, is relatively diminishing. Like this, you're presenting a picture that there was like sort of an unnecessary and sort of redundancy in education, when in fact the American statistics reveal that they're going in a different place.
The same Pell Grant you would get for going into science, you could get that same Pell Grant to go into Renaissance poetry. There was no connection to what that degree was worth, and it distorted people's decision-making.
Was it driven by money or driven by education? In other words, was there profit in that process?
Well, first of all, we love education, and we think it's good, but people should be making decisions based on how that degree is going to help them. And to borrow $100,000 for a degree in Renaissance poetry might not have been the best decision.
Is that a caricature, Tony? I mean, are the people who...
Not only is it a caricature, it's an excuse. And I'll tell you, the only thing I'm aware of is that business has done absolutely nothing wrong. The only thing that's what I hear, is that no step have they taken on any industry that eventually collapsed. No practice have they engaged in should ever, one, be regulated, or two, was an error. There was no mistake made there. Every mistake, every problem, the entire problem can be based on, can be assigned to big government and people who didn't deserve it or should have made better decisions.
Who are these people in government who are so much smarter and more moral than businessmen?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. But you assign no blame to the industries that profited off the bubble. You assign no blame to Wall Street, who made billions upon billions, should I say trillions, in poor decisions and creating the bubble, and will make it again today after we spend after the American taxpayer spent so much money bailing them out. Not only was TARP a mistake.
Don't bail out GM. Don't bail out Chrysler. I'd
like to finish a sentence.
Excuse me.
Not only was TARP a mistake, but also the practices that led to the bubble, which is something that should be either regulated prosecuted? Both.
The support of the housing industry that created a housing bubble was a mistake.
And I'm fine. And if you want to go to the support of the housing industry, then you've got the banking who created the derivatives that also, and the people who benefited off of that bubble. Don't make it a
derivatives are not
you know,
a
in a
problem.
country like Germany,
Yes, they are.
speaking of
They're not.
regulations
I
and green
understand derivatives, and they're
practices
not a problem.
and models for practice, in a country like Germany, a little-known thing, when a company is going to pull out of a city, and they know it's going to have a huge effect on the housing and the jobs and the community there, they have to get agreement. They have to pay to get out. They can't just say, hey, we can go to Costa Rica this week and
Right.
save all kinds of money, and we're going to
Which
have
means
a
nobody
ball in
wants to open a
Dubai
business
this
in
week.
Germany.
Well,
I mean,
Germany
it's a
does great. They're the A-plus guys
to
over
opening
there.
a business.
Well, the German economy seems
we
to be
don't-
doing quite well.
No,
in
no, but
Europe.
I'm
Right.
saying, but in that case, what you just described is a disincentive for someone to invest. If they
Within a
know to get out,
context,
they have to
Neil.
pay a ransom.
Neil, just because something is a disincentive doesn't mean, you have salt and pepper in your soup. You don't want it over-salted, over-peppered, but you got to have a little of this and that.
And I fully support
and
that.
a disincentive, thank you. And
Well, we agree about
salt and pepper and parsley for the
perfect.
Green Party.
Yeah, El Dante.
Yeah. Well,
But
there
again,
are
I
good
want to
practices
go
that
back
we
to the
could
issue of
get to.
education because I think you can see in Washington, D.C., you can see in Maryland, in Virginia, where you're running, the issue of education is such a dominating issue for parents because parents see that the schools in the United States are not producing the kind of quality education that we are seeing in other parts of the world. Right. We see a lot of kids going to college now, maybe more than went in the past, but they're saddled with $100,000 loans at the end of it. And now, because of the economic situation, unable to find jobs, unable to pay those loans back, unable to declare bankruptcy, as you said, because that's been exempted from bankruptcy laws. It feels like, to a lot of people, that there is a morass on education. So when you say, Neil, that the problem is the government has intervened too much,
Yes.
a lot of people will feel, well, maybe the government's intervened, but just not the right way. In
Well,
other
the
words-
government's done nothing to curb the power of the teachers' unions. The government's done nothing to sort of cut back on these college bureaucracies.
So you think it's the unions are the principal cause of the education? The
I don't
problem,
think that there's a
the
I don't
decline
see-
of American education is real. Is it because of the union?
Well, I think if you're going to talk about the decline of American education, one place to start is the teachers.
Okay.
I mean, they can't. You have to admit that they are some part of this solution. And the teachers get paid an extraordinary amount of money. There's
Not
great
compared to in Europe.
You guys
Again,
can jump in on that. I mean,
But I mean-
what is an extraordinary amount of money? What
Well, I
do
mean, in
teachers
Cambridge,
make?
Massachusetts, there are many teachers that make over $100,000 a year.
Most averages are between 40 and 50,000,
Which is a very good-
Which would be the case in Florida, and you might call it very good. The teaching profession, if you want to improve it, I think, and in most places, most folks recognize that teachers probably deserve a pay raise in order to.
So that's a 10-month year?
In order to hold on to
And
it.
summer's off.
Don't be insulting.
I'm not-
No,
what do you mean
come
insulting?
on. It's insulting to the profession of teachers.
I want to go.
Summer's off.
I want to
They do
go.
have the
I want to
summers
go to
off.
some of the other issues.
Everyone knows this.
I
Don't
think
deny it.
education will become.
didn't deny it.
Education
It's
will become a
insulting.
big issue. I want to talk about the housing question because here in the United States we have 9 million families have either been foreclosed or threatened with foreclosure because of serious delinquency on their mortgage. In some states, certainly in Nevada, in Florida, in California, these are dominating issues. When President Obama came into office, people thought not only would the war in Iraq end and other sort of big issues like that, but they thought the economy would improve, but in fact, more people have lost their homes. Can Obama do anything about it, and will the Republicans use that in the election?
Well, I think what happened with foreclosure is that it's so much of the foreclosure is governed at the local level in the local courthouses, and there are so many local people, local lawyers and judges and other people and real estate people and local banks, and so foreclosure really you couldn't really control it because it's at the.
Is
from
it a big
Washington,
issue in
D.C.
the election campaign?
I think it's a huge issue, but one of the things that has to come out is, and I think I have to give Mitt Romney credit for saying it, is that there have to be more foreclosures because we're sort of in this sort of dead period. It's like there's going to be pain we know there's going to be pain, and we're just trying to push off the pain.
But
No,
that's
I would
that's an
say that
unusual.
this is
Go ahead,
ridiculous.
jump in. That's an
No.
unusual program
Okay.
for a politician. Usually, they promise more, not more foreclosure.
That's
Well, I mean,
outrageous.
sometimes-
Outrageous. The foreclosure process is outrageous. It's very adverse. It costs about $12,000 for a note holder to foreclose.
Right.
They've challenged that person. The person's got their back to the wall. They take the copper pipes out of the house. They drag the appliances out. The whole neighborhood is in grief over this. It's not working with the person. Short sales are a much better solution. By the way, the real estate-owned departments of banks are notoriously bad stewards of. They shut the utilities off. And then even to show the house, you can't even show the house because you can't inspect it. You don't even know if the washing machine works anymore. The foreclosure process is highly adverse. And because you're in an adverse contention with that homeowner is going to find the place where you didn't jot and tittle and sign your name on that form, and they will take you to court again. And lose, lose, lose all the way down the line.
There was fraud on behalf of many of those homeowners. It's not being addressed.
Well,
Fraud from the banks or fraud from the homeowners?
Fraud. There were homeowners. There was significant fraud.
That didn't pay their-
But
but-
politically,
but-
it's impossible to prosecute any of that fraud. And so
Okay,
we just
I
sort
want
of-
to ask about accountability here.
To be
In
foreclosed is
1989, there was a big savings and loan crisis. There was a big banking crisis
Right.
then. It wasn't
People went to
until
jail.
2007.
Yeah.
And there were 10,000 referrals to the Justice Department, 1,000 convictions. Here, there's been no criminal referrals. I mean, for that crisis, and no convictions. What? Again, Republicans, Democrats, accountability. What's happened? What's changed?
Well, apparently little. And I think the important part, one of the important parts of President Obama's recent deal with lenders to the tune of 26 or maybe $40 billion, I've heard both numbers, that will have them address some issues. But it doesn't make a lot of sense. If you've been foreclosed on or you've lost your house and the government's saying, we've worked out a deal where you'll get $2,000, if you're the family, that doesn't mean a whole lot to you. But on the other side, we began this by mentioning Mitt Romney's approach to this was essentially saying we may need more foreclosures to right this. I think that we might have come to exactly the problem. There's a disconnect there, which is to say it may need to happen. The foreclosures are certainly, enough of them have happened. But if you think your job as an elected official is to come up with no ways. And I'm not saying government has to do everything for you, pay your mortgage or anything along those lines. Even the programs that President Obama has brought up has been essentially to help people who've been able to keep time with their payments, to make their payments on time. There are ways to address this. There are conservative ways. There are conservative solutions. But let folks know you are paying attention. And you can't be so reflexively anti-Obama that every plan is a bad plan. If he's addressing foreclosures where you're Mitt Romney and you say, well, I know that's bad, and doing nothing would have been better. That's not going to ring true to folks. And it doesn't speak to the Americans who've worked very hard, who find themselves affected by this bubble. Not all of them could possibly have been bad actors in this. And what will you do for those folks? You don't have to do everything, but let them know you're going to be responsive to this issue that is killing Florida, killing Nevada, burning our entire economy.
Right.
Right.
They're bulldozing
But this was,
houses in Detroit.
but this
It's
thing was
bulldozing.
created by government generosity and kindness and good feelings.
Again,
and everybody celebrated, and everybody had press conferences saying how many homeowners we have. It happened.
No.
Well, again, that was
and it was a lie.
But again, you made it
these are real
exclusive. The
people.
lie is that you made it exclusively government, as if there were no,
But when business makes a mistake, they suffer in the marketplace unless they're bailed out by their politician friends.
I think that truth does not negate the utter lie of it was government to create this. There were people who put products forth who made billions and billions of dollars off of those products who need to be held to account. That's all.
Well,
And
one
not
thing,
bailed out.
the point that I was making is no one has been held to account in the fact that, unlike 1989 in the savings and loan crisis, there haven't been thousands of criminal referrals to the Justice Department, no convictions. In fact, the TARP program, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, drew the ire of Americans, conservative and liberal, when it not only bailed out the banks to, again, hundreds of billions of dollars, but allowed the banks to have that money with no strings attached. Again, government
Right.
gave money but didn't have oversight, not really,
Oh, and
because
plus
they
the-
provided the bonus. 5,000 bankers received a bonus of more than $1 million each for their good work.
And we'll
after
never
all that.
know what exactly happened with the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve was giving these people billions and billions of dollars of loan, and not only American banks but European banks were getting these loans. That it was completely secret. There was no transparency. It's almost an accident that we found out about it.
We have just a minute left. Tony, take 30 seconds and tell us where you think this issue, the housing issue, will impact on the 2012 election. What are President Obama's chances, and do you think Mitt Romney will be the candidate? All in 30 seconds, or 20 seconds now.
So if I had to bet, I'd say yes, Mitt Romney, although I feel less certain about that now. As far as the housing bubble affecting this, I think it will play in. But I think President Obama has the hand up there because he has taken steps to do what he can about it, even though it may not improve all that much more. He's taken demonstrative steps there. And I think in that sense, that's Mitt Romney's flaw overall. He's not proposing solutions. He can only attack.
Okay, Janet, and for you, you're a third-party candidate.
Yes.
This should be the year of the third party.
Yes.
Will it be? Just in
Yes.
15 seconds.
I think Roseanne is going to be getting a lot of attention, and then Dr. Jill Stein will also for the Green Party. Also, regarding the housing issues, we have energy issues with houses also. Energy audits and solar heating and getting off the grid some and diversifying that energy portfolio with sustainable energy is what the Green Party
those are the
stands
big
for.
issues. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to have to leave it there. Janet Murphy, Tony Welsh, Neil McCabe.
Good to be with you.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Brian.